So firstly, welcome everyone to our VanQ webinar. I'm Shobit, and some of you may have seen me before. I work at Optimus, and we sponsor VanQ. And sorry, I'm just letting everyone in as people come. Okay, yeah, so we sponsor VanQ, and so for today, I'll just quickly touch upon a little bit about what we do and a little bit about Alex and what the presentation today is going to be and some housekeeping guidelines. So Optimus is a tech solutions company, and we help organizations in their digital transformation. So we help them with things like cloud migration, DevOps, application development, data analytics, application testing, and things like that. You can check more on that on our website. We are a Microsoft Gold certified partner, and we have two centers of operation. One is in obviously Vancouver, which is the headquarters, and second is in New Delhi, India. We are one of the fastest growing, fastest growing 500 companies in Canada. And we completely operate on Microsoft Azure, as that is our chosen platform. Now, that is a little bit about us. Moving on to some housekeeping guidelines. Firstly, I would request all of you to please keep your mic on mute while the presentation is going on. If you have any quick questions, please feel free to raise the hand in the, you'll see a little hand on the call, or you could also type in your question in the chat. If you raise your hand, I'll unmute you and you can ask your question to Alex. If you have any longer questions which you think might take a bit of time, you can hold off on them until the end. If you want, you could turn on your video, would make this feel a little more interactive, if you may. And yeah, so for today's presentation, we have Alex, who is a seasoned professional in QA, and he has presented at VanQ several times before, and his presentations are amazing. And he's going to be presenting on running Selenium automated tests in Azure DevOps. And without further ado, I would like to hand it off to Alex now.
That's not me.
Sorry?
That's not me. The noise isn't coming from me.
Yeah. I know. Just going through. Okay. Yeah, so Alex, whenever you're ready.
Yep, I can get started.
Yeah, it's all you now.
Okay, I think sharing the screen should be the first thing.
Yes.
Okay, so today the presentation is about running Selenium tests in a CI/CD environment. And since there are multiple types of CI/CD environments, I had to choose one, and Azure DevOps is the one that I picked. So how to run Selenium tests in a CI/CD environment using Azure DevOps pipelines. As Shobit said, anytime you have a question, just go ahead and ask it. It's probably better to discuss questions whenever you have them than at the end, because the questions are probably related to the current slide. So everything that you will see, as I said, is basically done with Azure DevOps. The automation code is Java. The unit testing framework is TestNG, and then the Maven is being used for structuring the project and for managing dependencies of the project and for running the tests. If I would have selected C#, probably 90% of what you will see would be very, very similar. Of course, the C# automation code would be slightly different from the Java automation code. There would be no TestNG, but we could use something like XUnit as a unit testing framework, and there would be no Maven. That we will have to use the Microsoft tools for managing dependencies and for running tests. So why did I select these technologies? Java is still very popular in general, and then in the test automation world, last time I checked, the Selenium bindings for Java were the best. Locally, in the local market from Vancouver, I think most of the test automation jobs are related to Java. And my personal opinion is that for people who start learning programming, Java and C# are a much better choice than Python or JavaScript. So this is why I chose Java. TestNG, I chose it instead of JUnit just because TestNG has some very, very useful listeners that can be used for taking screenshots and taking logs automatically. Maven, again, Maven is very useful for structuring the project in a standard way. Again, it will manage the dependencies of the project, in our case, just two dependencies, Selenium and then TestNG. And then we will use Maven commands for running the tests. And Azure DevOps, why not Jenkins or TeamCity? Well, Azure DevOps is much more than a CI/CD tool. So in Azure DevOps, compared to Jenkins, you will find not only pipelines, you will also find dashboards, you will find backlogs, you will find repositories, you will find test plans, you will find wikis. So it's a very, very, let's say, detailed and comprehensive solution. It's kind of like, you get everything in one box. And if you compare that with Jenkins, in Jenkins, you can do probably as much as you can do in Azure DevOps when it comes to pipelines. And but Jenkins doesn't have a repository, so you will need like a separate Git installation, and then it doesn't have a test plan, so then you will need like a third-party test plan management application, and so on and so forth, right? So that's the reason for Azure DevOps. And it's also important that when you want to learn how to run tests in CI/CD, if you choose Jenkins, then you'll have to install Jenkins. And that's not very difficult to do. But then if you will want to run your tests on multiple agents, then you will need to deal with agents. So things get a little bit complicated. Azure DevOps basically is very straightforward to use. It's free, so you can basically use for free for personal reasons everything that it offers, as we will see a little bit later. Why do you need to run the tests in a CI/CD pipeline? Well, Selenium tests, they should be executed as often as needed. So sometimes you may want to run the Selenium tests that cover the regression test suite every hour, or you may want to run them for every new build, or you may want to run them only over the night, right? And it's kind of difficult to do this if they only work on your machine. So you have to move them out from your machine if you want to execute them a lot. And Selenium tests should be available to everyone, and everyone should be able to execute them. So we don't build those Selenium tests for ourselves, right? We build them for other people, and then other testers should be able to execute them. Developers should be able to execute them. Business analysts should be able to execute them or read them. Product owners should be able to execute them or read them, right? And again, other people cannot basically execute the Selenium test that we build if the Selenium tests only work on our laptop. So again, that's a reason for basically being able to execute the tests somewhere else.
Hi, Alex. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but Is it possible to present, like full screen the presentation, just in
Yeah,
case
yeah,
some people may have difficulty reading? Okay,
yeah,
thanks.
yeah,
Sorry.
for sure. That's okay. I'll just take the. Yeah, is this good?
Yeah.
Okay, so again, Selenium tests should run on any operating system and any browser. Most of the people are using Windows on their laptops, so they should not only run on Windows, they should run in Linux, they should run on Mac OS if needed. They should not only run in the Chrome browser, they should also run in Firefox and Edge. And sometimes there may be requirements that the tests don't run only in the latest browser versions. You may want to run them in previous Chrome versions. So not only in the latest one, maybe 3 versions before as well. Again, that's pretty difficult to do if you only run the test on your local computer. And again, the Selenium test should run on any platform. So even if you build them on your laptop in Windows and using Chrome, they should run not only on your laptop, they should run on remote virtual machines, they should run also in Docker containers. So if your tests only run locally, none of these things is very easy to do, and most of them are not really possible. So then we should basically start running them in Azure DevOps. If they run in Azure DevOps, then the test can basically run in Windows and in Linux. They can run on any browser. They can run in virtual machines. They can run in Docker containers. They can run on demand. They can be scheduled. They can be triggered. And basically, anyone who has access to the project from Azure DevOps can run them. And since the test will run through a pipeline, maybe other pipelines can basically trigger running your pipeline when they finish. So let's say if developers have a build pipeline that would compile the code, run unit tests, and then deploy the new build on a machine. After that, if that pipeline succeeds, maybe that pipeline can trigger your pipeline, the automation pipeline, to start running on the environment where the new build was deployed. It's not difficult at all to run the Selenium test in Azure DevOps. You just need a few steps. Convert the project to Maven format. Of course, this applies to Java. Tests for C#, it's a little bit different. Run testing command prompt using Maven commands. Create a new Azure DevOps project. Add a local code to the Azure DevOps repository. Create a pipeline that runs the tests, run the pipeline, and check the results. So just a few steps to basically getting started. The first step is convert the project to Maven format. And there are 2 options. If your project is not in a Maven format, there are 2 options. Let's assume that you use Eclipse. So in Eclipse, you can create a Maven project. And you can just copy the classes from your existing project to the Maven project, which is a little bit tedious, but it's possible. And then the other option is Eclipse has an option that allows you to convert a non-Maven project to Maven format. One of the biggest advantages of using Maven is that you can describe all of the project dependencies in an XML file. So Maven is using a file called pom.xml. And inside of this pom.xml, you basically describe the dependencies. In our case, Selenium is the first one, and then testng would be the second one. And this is great because, in the future, if there is a need to upgrade the Selenium version, that's being done just by modifying this number here. And then if testng needs to be upgraded to version 8, let's say, you can basically just modify this number here in the XML file. And Maven will take care of the rest. The other good thing that using Maven brings is that the project will start having like a standard structure. And Maven has Maven insists. What is pointer? Oh, that's cool. Okay, I didn't know. So Maven has the SRC folder here, where all of the source files will go, and then it has the target folder in here where all of the artifacts that come from executing the tests will go. So in the target folder, usually you will have the compiled classes, you will have any files related to reporting, and any other artifacts that you may be interested in having. So logs, for example, if your project is storing information to logs, so you may have logs here. This is a subfolder of target. Screenshots, again, this is a subfolder of target. So target is the folder where all of the artifacts, all of the outputs of running the tests will be generated. In SRC, all of the source files will be stored, and here usually you have like two subfolders, main and test. Under test you will have tests and usually page objects, and then under main you may have the framework. The project, of course, should have support not only for running the tests. So running the test is the most important thing, but then the project should have functionality that allows you also to collect screenshots automatically. Like there is no need to add code to each method of each page object class or to each test for doing that. And again, the project should allow you to collect information in logs. You may have exception logs, you may have tracing logs. And also the project should basically have support for creating HTML reports. The HTML reports basically should show for each test what exactly did the test do. All of these are artifacts and they should go, as I mentioned already, in the target folder. The artifacts, in our case, because we use Java and TestNG, they should be collected automatically with a listener, a TestNG listener. In this case, the class is called listener, so listener.java, and then the listener's annotation is being used to specify that for this test class, that listener will be used. The tests can have groups added using the groups attribute for the test annotation. So this test keyword search returns results belongs to the high group, and then this one here belongs to the medium group. Groups are a good way of basically breaking down tests into categories. So you can break down tests into test classes, but you can also break down tests into categories. And a test, of course, can belong to one or more groups. So that's the first thing. The project has to be organized as per the requirements that Maven brings. So the project should be in the Maven format. The second part is, since we are using a Maven project, and we can run the testing command prompt using Maven commands. And the command that allows us to do that is mvn clean test. So basically, if you open command prompt and then you go to the root folder of the project, you just run mvn clean test, and then this command will do a lot of good things. It will clean up previous artifacts by deleting the target folder. So whatever logs, screenshots, reports that were created by previous builds will be removed. If the project dependencies are not downloaded already, it will download them. If some Maven dependencies are missing, they will be downloaded. The code will be compiled if there are any changes to the source files. The test will be executed, and then the execution status will be reported. The Maven clean command usually displays a lot of information, so I just included like a little bit of it just to see where different things are. I think I can minimize this. So this part here is basically deleting the target folder. After that, you can see compiling the source files. And after that, again, more compiling here. And finally, running the test suite. And you can see the Chrome driver being started. And at the end, you see the test execution results. So 3 tests passed, 0 failures, 0 errors, 0 skipped. So all of this happens by just running that command, mvn clean test. Clean and test, of course, are goals for Maven. And the ability of running the testing command prompt with the Maven command is extremely useful, because that's exactly what we will do when we will create the pipeline in Azure DevOps. We will use the exact same command. Create a new Azure DevOps project. So at the end, there will be like a demo section where I will basically show how easy it is to create a project and how easy it is to create a pipeline. And then I'll show you some examples of pipelines. So here we'll just go through a few steps, which again I will show you later on. So to create a new Azure project, you just go to that URL. There is a button that I will show you named Start Free. Then a pop-up will be displayed where you have to specify an email address and then a password, and it requires a Microsoft account. Then on the next page, there is a link called New Organization that you have to click, specify a name for the organization, and then complete creating it. So this is a screenshot of that pop-up that allows creating the organization. So this should be the email that I use to log in. And then here you basically have the name for the new organization. This would be the name. And as soon as an organization is created, then you can create a new project. An organization can have one or more projects. You can set the project as being private or public, and after that you create a project. So this is basically what you see after an organization is created. You get this window, and in here you specify the project name. You set the visibility public or private, and you click the Create Project button to create the project. And this is what you see after you create a project, right? This is the home page of the project, and on the left side, you basically see some of the features that you can access, like dashboards, wikis, boards, repos, pipelines, and there are a few more that are not visible. Add the local code to the repository. Of course, we just created the organization and we just created the project, so the repository will be empty. So if you click on this option here, you will basically get nothing. It will just say the repository is empty, and you should add some code, right? And that code should be the code that you have on your local computer. So how do we move that code, copy that code from the local computer to the Azure DevOps repository? We just need to go through a few Git commands. So the first thing is we have to click on the repos option of the left menu to open the repository of the project and copy the URL. And I'll show you this a little bit later. So this is basically the URL of the repository. I mean, something like this. In your case, it may have like a different name here and then a different name here. But this is the URL of the repository, of the Azure DevOps repository. After that, locally, you open command prompt, make the project root folder the current folder. So you basically just go into that folder. You run the git init command to initialize the git empty repository in the application root folder. Of course, this requires that you have git installed on your local computer. And the message will say initialized empty git repository. Then you have to kind of like make a connection between the local repository and the cloud repository. And here you should have a slash, which I deleted by mistake. So the command of doing that is git remote add origin, and in here you specify the URL of the Azure DevOps repository, right? So git remote add origin, and then the URL of the Azure DevOps repository. And to verify that this actually worked, you use a different command, git remote -v, which will show you basically when you do a push or a fetch. So when you try to get latest changes, where those latest changes will come from. So they will come from here, from the cloud repository. And when you try to push your changes, it shows you where they will go. So they will go to the same place in this situation. After that, since we created the local repository and we added a remote to it, now we can basically start adding the files to the local index. So first, you basically use the git status command, which will show that all of the files that you have. How do I get rid of this thing? Sorry, I need to go back. So all of the files here, all of the files from the root folder are not tracked yet, right? And then to track them, you have to basically use another command, git add dot, meaning current folder. So this should add all of the files from the root folder to the git index. Then you can commit the new files to the local repository. So git commit -m, and this would be the message of the commit, adding code to repository. You can see in here that the files are being committed. And then to push everything to the Azure DevOps repository, you just use git push -u origin -all, and you will see here basically the results. So the pushing will be done to this URL, which is the URL of the repository, and the branch where the code will go is master. So as soon as you do that, then all of the files will be in here. So when you click on this option, and I will show you that a little bit later, you should be able to see that it's not empty anymore. You should have all of the folders and all of the files that were copied from your local computer to this repository. And finally, we need to create a pipeline, right? So the pipeline that runs the tests. The pipeline, you may ask yourself, what exactly is a pipeline? So a pipeline is basically something that has a lot of tasks and executes these tasks in a sequence. Because in Azure DevOps, in order to execute the Selenium tests, you need to basically first select a virtual machine where they will be executed. The second thing will be the code will have to be copied from the repository on the virtual machine. After that, the code will have to be compiled, and finally the code will have to be executed, right? So you have different tasks that need to be executed, and the pipeline is where all of these things are happening. So to create a pipeline, and again we'll go through a quick example of this, you basically in the menu click on pipelines, which should display this menu, and then this is the option that will need to be clicked next. And clicking that option will show you this page where you click the Create Pipeline button. The next page will basically say what kind of a repository is used for your code. And of course, Azure Repos Git is the one. Next page will say select a repository. So you just say Selenium, Java, Azure, I mean, then the name of your project, right? And the next page will show you a lot of different types of pipelines. And my favorite is to basically always go with starter pipeline, because I prefer to write the code by myself, just so I'm clear what it does. So select the starter pipeline in here. And then this is what you will see. You will see the page titled Review Your Pipeline. This is an editor. So in here, you will be able to do write the code for the pipeline or make changes. As the extension of this file suggests, whatever you write in here would be YAML code. And then the pipeline will be saved into this file. Of course, this file will go into the same repository where your code is. So what's next after you have this? Well, you should basically keep the trigger and the pull elements and remove everything else. So you should keep this one and this one, and whatever else is there you should remove because they are just sample code. The VM image from pull should be changed from Ubuntu latest to Windows latest. So here, instead of like saying that you want the pipeline to run on a virtual machine that is using the latest version of Ubuntu, you can basically change this to Windows. Then there is an assistant that I will show you shortly, where you can basically see a lot of different tasks that can be used in a pipeline, and you can search for a task, like you can search for Maven, which will display these two. So we select the first one, and then this pop-up will be displayed. In this pop-up, you don't need to change the POM file because this is how it's named for us, but you have to basically change the goals to clean test in here. Then you click on the add button, and then this is what you get, right? So this is the pipeline that will execute the Selenium tests from your project. It has basically three parts. So trigger, master, here it specifies what is the branch that should be monitored for changes. If there are code changes in that branch, then this pipeline will be executed automatically. If you don't want that to happen, you can change master to no or to dev if you are interested in monitoring the dev branch. The next element is called pool, and inside of it you define what is the type of virtual machine that you want to execute your code on. So if you want to execute your code on a Windows virtual machine, then you can basically use Windows latest. If you want Ubuntu, then you can use Ubuntu latest, and there are many other types. As I mentioned before, you can use Azure DevOps for free for personal reasons, right? Which means you will get access to any virtual machine that is available, but there are some limitations. I mean, if you want to basically run tests in parallel on 20 virtual machines, that will not be possible, right? I believe you can only use up to 5 virtual machines at a time, but you can access any of the virtual machines that they have. So after we selected the virtual machine, then after that you have the task. So the task should be really easy to understand. It's a Maven task. The Maven POM file is called POM XML. The goals are clean test. So basically the command that will be executed is mvn clean test. We want to, when the execution finishes, we want to publish the JUnit results. The test result files will be stored in here. So ** basically means any folder, right? So it will basically look for a subfolder called Surefire reports, and then inside of it, it will look for XML files that start with test. And that's about it. So we have the pipeline. What's next? Well, we have to save the code, commit it to the repository, and after that, run it.
Alex, I think we have a question. So I'm not sure how to pronounce your name, so I'm not going to try it. I'm just going to unmute you so you can ask your question to Alex.
Yep.
If I don't know if you have a mic or how exactly you can ask your question, because I don't see the... Okay, yeah, there you go. You unmuted yourself. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Hey, Alex, thanks for the presentation. While going through the Azure DevOps, when you selected the tool and the trigger, after that you mentioned that you have to go use the assistant to go to the Maven. And can you tell me like how you can navigate to that section when you type Maven and it comes up, it displays the Maven?
Yeah. So I will basically give you a demo. And in that demo, everything should be much clearer. So just wait for a couple of minutes, and then you will see how the Maven task can be selected.
Okay.
So I didn't include screenshots because that would have meant like lots and lots and lots of screenshots. I thought, okay, I will just add some steps, and then at the end we'll basically go through a demo, and that demo should make it all clear. Okay, so the demo. So basically, I'm going to sign out from this, and I believe if you go to dev.azure.com, so this is the home page, and then you click on Start Free right here. And after that, yeah, it signs me in right away. So you should basically log in, right? But after you log in, basically, you should, if you want to create an organization, you click on this link here, and then that will take you up to here. You click on Continue. You specify the name of your organization. So of course, it will try to generate something randomly. So you can select that, Continue. It's taking you to your new organization. And this is the home page, right? So now you want to create a project. So to create a project, I don't know, new project, and then you click on create project, and this is the home page, right? So this is the name of the project, organization, and we are on the summary page. So in here, as I mentioned, there are lots of different things. So there is a dashboard, which doesn't have anything yet, since this is a new project. Then you have a wiki. Then boards has a lot of different things: work items, boards, backlogs, sprints, queries, repos. Again, in the repos, files, if you click files, it should basically show you that there is nothing in here. In here, you can see commits as soon as you will start having some commits, pull requests as soon as you will start doing that, branches. And then after repos, you have pipelines, which again has multiple options: pipelines, environments, releases, library, task groups, deployment groups. Then test plans. So test plans, progress report runs, load test. So in here you can have basically all of your test cases. Artifacts is the last option, and then underneath you have project settings. So I'm not going to show you how to move the code from the local computer to this, but what I'm going to show you instead is, so I have a project that already, I have an organization that already has 2 projects. So this is one of them. And then if you click on here and then on files, what? Yeah. So this is basically everything that you will find in the repo, right? So you have the SRC folder and you have some other things. Inside of the SRC folder, there is a main and the test. Inside of main, there are some other things. And you can basically go back, and inside of test, again, there are some things in here, some page objects, and then there are also some tests, right? So, so that's what you will see after you basically execute those Git commands that I already mentioned, right? You will see basically all of the folders and all of the files from your project. You will see them in here. And after that, if you want to get started with the pipeline is very easy to create. You mouse over this icon here and you click on pipelines. And after that, what you do is you click on new pipeline. And in here, where is your code? Azure Repos Git. So this should be your current project, right? So just click it. Then you have this window with like lots of different types of pipelines. There are like lots and lots of them. They are just templates, right? But personally, I prefer to go with the starter template. And in here, I don't need any comments. So usually I'm just deleting them. And then everything under pool I don't need. So what do we have in here? So we have the trigger, which basically says master. So the master branch will be the one that is monitored. And after that, we have in here the pool that says the virtual machine will be Ubuntu latest. We don't need that. We can use Windows latest. And now we are basically ready to start adding something here. So on the right side, I hope you see this, there is something called Show Assistant, right? So Show Assistant, if you click it, it will basically show you a lot of different tasks that are available to be used in the pipelines, right? And then let me just scroll down to Maven. Okay, so for Maven, you have two of them. So the one that we are interested in is the one that will do build, test, and deploy. So click on this. And in here, what we have is we have the name of the XML file. The goal is package. In our case, the goal should be clean test, right? Clean test. And after that, there are no options. Publish should be like that. Test result files can stay as is. So nothing else, right? And then when you click on add, what you get is you basically get the code for it added in here. Don't understand why there is an error here. Invalid YAML structure. Why? I don't know. I did something wrong. Anyways, so this is how you find the tasks in here. And then as soon as you select the one that you want to use, you will basically have the YAML code added to the pipeline. And then the YAML code will have whatever selections you made. So these are the goals, clean test, the name of the POM file, and then the location of the XML files with the test results, and the setting for publishing JUnit results. And after that, you have to basically save here, and saving will basically show you a pop-up like this. So you can commit to a branch, and after that you run it. But I'm not going to do that because there is no code. Oh no, there is code. Sorry, there is code for this. So instead of like doing this, I'm going to show you some pipelines that I put together so we can look at them. So this one here, basically says that it doesn't want to monitor any branch of the repository. It will use Ubuntu latest. The task that we'll use is Maven, and then the goals are clean test. And then the only thing that is different is that in here, it basically creates an environment variable. So the code that I have in this project basically gets the browser version from an environment variable. And then in Ubuntu, this is how you do it, right? You have to basically type this command in bash. So export browser equals and then the value, which is Chrome in my case. So since the code requires that the browser version is in the browser environment variable, I need to create it. And to create it, I need to do that with a bash task, which again you will find in the task assistant. So bash right here, right? So if you click on this, you have two options. You can basically have the code into a file, or you can have it in line. And in here, you basically just create your command. So what does this do? It will use an Ubuntu virtual machine. Inside of it, it will create a browser environment variable. What is this? So I didn't want to hard code in here and say Chrome, right? Because if next time I would want to run the Selenium test in Firefox, I would have to come here and then just modify Chrome to Firefox. Instead, notice here a button called variables. So if you click on that, in here, you can basically create variables, right? So you can create variables by clicking on the plus button. So in here, you can specify the name of the variable and the value of the variable. And if you want that variable to have a secret value, like not visible by anybody, you can just check this checkbox. As soon as you create a variable like browser, if you want to use that variable in the YAML code in here, you have to use this notation, $ round bracket, name of the variable, round bracket, right? So when I'm saying here export browser equals $ round bracket browser round bracket, basically this will be substituted with Chrome, with the value of the browser variable, which is Chrome. So this bash task creates an environment variable inside of this virtual machine with the name browser and the Chrome value. And that will be used by the code, right? So now I want to run this. Clicking on the run button, it says it will basically get the code from the dev branch. Click on run. And then as soon as you click on run, you will see the home page of the new build because the new build is created. And inside of that, you will see that the job is queued, right? So you can click on that. And in here, you will start seeing some things happening, right? So the job basically was started, and then some things are going. And let's finish until it ends. And if somebody has a question, we can discuss that. Okay, so the job passed because all of this passed. If at least one of them fails, the job will fail. So what do we have here? We have different phases, right? So initialize job basically tells you that, you know, the machine that was selected for running this pipeline is called this. The agent version is that. The operating system doesn't say much. Then the next one basically shows you that the code is being checked out from the repository. And I believe at the bottom, you should see that this is the dev branch right here. The next one is the task that creates the environment variable. So see the $ round bracket browser round bracket was substituted with Chrome. So this will create inside of the Ubuntu virtual machine the browser environment variable. The environment variables are basically, if you are curious what those are, so they are similar with these things here in Windows, with these things here, right? Like that. But for Linux, not for Windows, right? So after we created that environment variable, the next task basically is the Maven part. The Maven part doesn't display a lot of information, and I'll show you why. And finally, it basically runs the tests in here. And at the end of it, you can see 3 tests executed. The post job task basically just says that it finished. So this is the build, right? This is the build that was executed for this version of the code. In here, you will see that it took 40 seconds. It executed today. Just give me a second. My dog is scratching my door. Just one moment. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so what do we see in here? We see that the build was executed today at 6:49 p.m. Took 40 seconds. It executed on the dev branch. I executed it. All of the tests passed. In here in the tests tab, you see that there are 3 tests that passed. And then if we scroll down in here and we uncheck aborted and failed, then we can see here the tests, right? So this is the first test, and this is the second test, and this is the third test. 3 passed, 0 failed, okay. There is nothing useful in the code coverage. So that's basically a build, right? And then if you click in the breadcrumbs in here, the pipeline name, then you will see all of the builds that were executed for this pipeline, right? And there are quite a few. Any questions so far? So far, so good.
Alex.
Yes.
We have used to create environment variable. We have used task. Is there any another option to create environment variable instead of task?
So you have to create the environment variable in the virtual machine, right? So I don't know if there is any other way. I mean, of course, if you use like a Windows virtual machine, you will not use bash as the task type. You will use there is one called CMD line. I think if you use Docker, you can basically pass the environment variable in the Docker run command. But if you do not use Docker and you use virtual machines, I don't know if there is any other way.
Yeah, because I'm using a Windows machine, so.
Yeah, so for a Windows machine, the task is called CMD line and the command is setx. So you will have to basically, so let's see, if you go in the pipeline, let's see right here. So you will have to select the, which one, command line, this one here. And then what you would have to do would be something like setx browser, something like this. Right, so it should be something like that.
Okay.
For Windows, okay. So the virtual machine cannot be Ubuntu for this; it will have to be Windows. And again, this being YAML code, you have to make sure that the alignment is really good. Otherwise, it will start complaining. So something like that, right? So this is how you do it in Windows, and this is how you do it for Ubuntu.
Okay.
Cool.
I have one more query. We have just executed one JUnit test, but it's showing like 3 tests passed. What does that mean?
I don't know. I mean, I'll have to look at your code, right?
No, just you have executed one test, JUnit test, and it is showing the result 3 tests passed.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I understand. So basically, in here, it shows 3 tests were executed, and the names of the tests are right here. So any page has results is the first one. Next page has results as the second one, and keyword search returns results is the third one. So the code has 3 tests. If you look in the repository in here in files, and then if you go to src test java tests and you open the vpl test.java, this is probably very small, so I'm going to try to increase it. So in here there are 3 tests. So this is the first one.
Okay.
And then this is the second one. And this is the third one. So that's why it shows 3 tests.
Okay. These 3 tests are executed in 3 browsers?
No, only in Chrome in this case.
Okay. Thank you, Alex.
Okay, good. Any other questions so far? Okay, so this is basically a pipeline that shows you how to use a variable, right? So again, if you go inside of it, it uses a variable called browser. And I have one more pipeline that is fairly similar to this one, like how to execute tests by priority. So basically this one, this is the code. It has 2 variables in here, browser and priority. Priority is high, and then it still creates the environment variable for the browser name, but then pay attention here to the Maven command. So the Maven command basically is very similar. So clean test -q. If you use -q, which comes from quiet, will display only a little bit of information when you run the Maven command. Otherwise, it will basically display tons and tons of it, and most of it you don't care about. So in this case, we only want to execute the tests that have the groups equal with something, right? Again, I didn't want to hard code here and say hi. Instead, I've created the priority variable with the value high, and then in here, the value of that variable will be used. So what this will do, it will execute all of the tests that have the groups equal with high. And as I mentioned before, I think we'll look in the repository directly. So src test Java tests VPL test. So the tests have groups, right? So the first test, which is this one here, is using the high groups. The second one, which is this one, is using the medium groups. And the third one, which is this one, is using the low group, right? So this pipeline will only execute this test. Everything else is the same. So let's run it, run. Yes, go ahead.
Actually, just we have created the variable browser and priority. Where we can create that variable?
I'll show you as soon as this one finishes.
Oh, thank you.
So it's basically the same things: initialize job, checkout, bash. So Maven here, if we scroll to the end, it only executed one test, not three, right? And then if you click again on the in the breadcrumb on the build number, you can see that it took less time, so 22 seconds. And then in tests, you can see that there is only one test, right? Only one. And then if you go here, I don't know why they chose to check aborted and failed. And if you uncheck those things, you can see that the test that was executed is keyword search returns results test, right? So only one, because only one test has the high priority. And then to answer your question, in here in the YAML editor, the variables are created by clicking this button. So you click here and then you click on plus. And that will open this pop-up, and in here you basically just enter the name and the value of your new variable. And if you want to delete a variable, you click on this garbage can here.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. So that's another type of a pipeline that will execute tests by groups, right? Now, in the presentation, I mentioned that the project should have support for artifacts like logs and then screenshots and HTML reports. But how do you see where those things are, right? So here I've created the pipeline that will display where those things are. So inside of the pipeline, at the end, the code is the same. At the end, I've added one more task, bash, which will basically display. So ls is the equivalent of dir for bash in Linux. So it will display the content of the system.default working directory /target. So what is this system.default working directory? This is basically the folder from the virtual machine where the code will be checked out from the repository, right? So when the pipeline starts, the code is checked out from the repository. The code will be placed into this location, system.default working directory. So over there, you should basically expect to find everything from your project, right? So after the tests are executed, the target folder is created, and then we should basically expect it to be there, right? So this command basically will list what is the content of the target folder. So let's see how this goes.
Hey, Alex, there's, I think, another question from Hardik in the chat.
What's the question?
So the question is, hi, Alex, does Azure Pipeline have capabilities for test result reports? If not, what's the best way to generate the reports or share notifications of test results?
So the test reports of Azure DevOps are pretty basic. But then if you use Java, for creating the tests, you can basically create reports with the Allure framework, and I believe there are a few more that that can be used. And if you do not use Java and you use, let's say, JavaScript, again, Allure can be used for creating very, very sophisticated reports. And if you use C#, again, you can use Allure, but only if the unit testing framework is not XUnit. Okay, so here in this case, basically we have the checkout, we have the creating the browser environment variable, running the tests, again, one test. And then if you click on display target, it basically shows what is the content of that folder, right? So in that folder, we have classes, generated sources, generated test sources, logs, which is where the logs that this solution are stored, Maven status screenshots, which again is the folder where all of the screenshots are placed, Surefire reports, where you will have the XML files that will have the test execution status and test classes, right? So this is where the logs can be found and the screenshots can be found. And why do we need to know this? We need to know this because if you want the pipeline to basically show you the logs or show you the screenshots, you have to know first where they are, right? So this is how you figure out where they are. You add at the end of the pipeline a task like this. Again, if you use Windows, this should be CMD line, and instead of ls, you will have dir, right? And this will display the contents of the target folder. So to understand why this is important, I have for you a pipeline that will publish the logs as an artifact, right? So what does that mean? So after the tests execute, whatever logs are generated will be associated with the pipeline so you can look at them, right? So how do you do that? You basically, in the pipeline, at the end of it, so after the task that lists the content of the target folder, you add one more task that is called publish build artifacts. The name of what it is publish log file as artifact. And basically here you have two things, the name of the artifact and then the path that you want to publish. So this task will basically get everything from the system.default working directory /target/logs, and then it will publish the content of this folder and under the name logs. So let's see how that happens. So if your project creates any logs or any screenshots or any HTML reports, anything that you want to basically look at afterwards, you have to publish those files as an artifact. And publishing as an artifact basically means that those files will be copied somewhere and they will be associated with the build so you can look at them. That's what publishing the artifacts means. An artifact is basically just an output, right? Something that is generated by the pipeline. Okay, so we have the pipeline passing. If we click publish logs here, you can see that one file was uploaded and then it was associated with the build, with this build. And if you click in the breadcrumb on the build number in here, you will see one published, right? So that will be that means that the pipeline has one published artifact. You click on that and look what you have here. You have logs. And if you expand that, you have a trace.log file that the project generates. You can basically click that, it's downloaded. And now if you right click it and open it in Notepad++, you can basically see what it is inside of it, right? So it's basically just a tracing log, right? It shows you for each test, like what are the methods that were executed. Open homepage, search for, go to results page is displayed, all of those things, right? And the same for all of the tests. So that's basically about artifacts, right? If you want to display the logs, and you can have multiple types of logs. You can have exception logs, you can have tracing logs, you can have all sorts of things, right? This is how you do it. And the next pipeline is very similar to this. is just that it will publish screenshots as artifacts. So let's look at the code first to see what are the differences. In here, at the end, publish screenshots as artifact. The task is still publish build artifact, and then it just uses a different path. So instead of target logs, it will use target screenshots, and the artifact name will be screenshots. So if we run it, in this situation, we'll have two types of artifacts. We will have logs and we will have screenshots. The fact that you can basically use this system for free is like one of the greatest things ever for people that want to learn how to run tests in CI/CD. Because again, for Jenkins, you have to install it, right? And then if you want to use you install Jenkins locally, and locally you have Windows, how will you run your tests in Linux? I don't know. How will you run your tests in Docker? Well, you'll have to install Docker, right? So it's like a lot of complications. With Azure DevOps, everything comes outside of the box. So here we have the job for publishing the log, one file, and here we have the thing for the screenshots. We have 3 files, and if we click on the build number in the breadcrumb, now in here we have 2 artifacts. So we have logs as before, and then we have screenshots, right? 1, 2, 3. And see, the screenshots have the status, passed or failed at the beginning, and then the name of the test, and then the date. So if I click on one of them, it gets downloaded, and then you can actually look at it. Right, so this should be the screenshot for the first test. The screenshot for the third test would be this one here. Core Java for the impatient. So the pipeline that publishes screenshots as artifacts is very similar to the pipeline that publishes logs as artifacts. And what else can you do? Well, let's say you want to execute tests in sequence. So let's say you want to execute the low priority tests, and after that you want to execute the medium priority tests, and after that you want to execute the high priority tests, right? So if you look at this pipeline, this is what it does. It's a little bit different from before because it starts using jobs, right? So in here, you basically define a job, and then for that job, you specify what is the virtual machine. And then there is something called strategy and the matrix. So what this means is that for that specific job, you define runs. So you want to have a tests high run, a tests medium run, and a tests low run. And then for each of these runs, you can have a variable with different values. So the test high run will have the test high priority high, this one will have medium, and this one will have low. So why is this needed? Basically, if a job has a strategy and the matrix, that means that it will be executed 3 times. So it will be executed once for this, second time for that, and then third time for this, right?
Hey, Alex, I believe one of our attendees has a question.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to unmute them, and then you should be able to ask your question. Go ahead.
Yep, go ahead.
Hi, Alex. This is Jnani. I'm just, I have a question regarding the trigger.
Yeah.
You have, before you said we can have the option of master branch.
Yes.
Or as the option of no. In this case, if it is mastered, that means like every time you come into the master branch, the build is going to start automatically?
Yes.
So in this case, when we are saying no as the trigger, then are we going to start the job manually?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So is there any option for timed execution, like as in Jenkins?
Yes. I'll go into that at the end.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Alex, I have a query regarding pipeline. I have executed the pipeline. For example, it was successful, but mistake I have deleted that pipeline. Is there any option to retrieve that pipeline again? Or I need to create
if you
pipeline.
deleted the pipeline and you need to recover it, you should discuss with your DevOps team, because the pipeline is not exactly deleted from the system. They have an option of undeleted.
Oh.
Yeah, so I don't know if there is a way for you to undelete it by yourself, because I don't think that you will have like all of the permissions. But then if you delete the pipeline by mistake, which is quite difficult to do, people who have like more permissions, more administrative permissions, should be able to give it back to you.
Okay.
Cool. So if the job has a strategy in this case, then it will be executed 3 times. So it will be executed once, twice, and 3 times. And then this is a variable that gets a different value for each run. So for this run, it will be high. For this run, it will be medium. For this run, it will be low. And the strategy has an option max parallel, which in our case will make it 1. So these things will run sequentially. First, you'll have the tests high, then you'll have tests medium, and then you'll have tests low. And after you have the strategy, you can basically define the steps. And the steps are the same, right? You have the bash task that creates the environment variable, and then you have the Maven thing here, which is the same again. And the Maven is using in goals clean test minus the groups equal, and here it's using the variable that is associated with the run. So test priority, right? So test priority, remember, is this thing here. So for the first run, the Maven job will run clean test minus the groups equals high. For the second one, it will run clean test minus the groups equals medium. For the third one, clean test minus the groups equal low. This thing is the same. The only difference is that the artifact name is changed so that it will reflect the name of the run. And this one is the same. The only difference is that the artifact name is updated with the name of the run, right? So let's see what happens here. If we run the pipeline and then we go here in the jobs, you have 3 things started in the same time, right? And then they will be executed one after another. So tests high will go first. And after that, you will get tests medium. And after that, you will get tests low. They execute the same code, right? The only difference is in the Maven command, because the Maven command will basically take the priority from the matrix definition of the run. Okay, so this should be the first one, and then as soon as it finishes, you will see the second one starting. The second one or the third one? Yeah, the second one, which is this. Okay, so it basically executes the test with the priority medium, and it will publish logs and screenshots. And finally, so the first 2, the first 2 are ready, and now it will basically go into the low. Okay, so now it executes the tests low run. Same thing, checks the code, creates the browser environment variable, executes the test, publishes the artifacts. So, okay, and it's all done. So all of them passed, right? And now if we look into the home page of the build, in here we will see more artifacts, because the logs, basically you will have one log for the high run, another log for the low run, another log for the medium run, screenshot for the high run, screenshot for the low run, and screenshot for the medium run, right? So the logs and the screenshots are customized by run, right? So it's basically the same job executed 3 times. And the last pipeline is basically about executing things in parallel. So in here, compared to the previous pipeline, there is no change. There is only one change. The change is that we want to do everything in parallel. So all of these runs will run in the same time. So let's execute this. And then let's see if the jobs are basically going in parallel in this case, right? So you still see the, not the jobs, the runs. So you have the runs, and then see, they basically start in the same time. So test high started, test medium started, and then test low started, right? So they don't go sequentially anymore. They basically execute in the same time, which means that in this case, instead of using one virtual machine that will execute sequentially the test for the first run, after that test for the second run, test for the third run. In this case, because we run in parallel, we will use 3 virtual machines, right? So you will basically have everything done in parallel. And then if you check in here, the execution is 28 seconds. And if we compare with the previous execution, so run jobs sequentially, it finished in 1 minute 37 seconds. This one finished in 28 seconds, right? Which is like 30% of the time. So lots of different things can be done. Of course, I'm not going to touch the Docker containers, not at all, because it's like the time is not sufficient for that. But I covered quite a few different things, like, you know, creating a pipeline that is using a variable, creating a pipeline that will run things by a group, creating pipelines that display artifacts, logs, and screenshots, creating a pipeline that runs things sequentially or in parallel, right? And there are many, many other things that you can do. I didn't cover reporting at all, like Lua reporting, which is for sure an option. I didn't cover using Docker containers. And of course, all of this was about Azure DevOps. We can do Jenkins some other time. Any questions?
Yeah, Alex, sorry for asking more questions.
Yep.
Here I have a query. Just we have seen like capturing the screenshot for the pipeline. Is there any way to capture the video in the pipeline to analyze the like where we have like got the error?
Yeah, there are ways, but I'm not doing that at all. For me, you know, getting a screenshot of the page where the code failed, and then getting the exception and getting the stack trace, and maybe getting a report showing everything that was executed up to that moment is sufficient. There are ways for sure. There are some frameworks that allow you to basically record videos. I believe they use Docker containers and stuff. I know that if you run tests in the cloud with Sauce Labs will do that for you by default. So there are options, but I didn't practice much doing that because I don't feel that that's very useful. I mean, at least for me. So I cannot give you any advice on it.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. And okay. I have one more query.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. See, once pipeline has been completed, we will get the artifacts. So these artifacts, one thing I know that artifacts we can use in the deployment pipeline, and here you have downloaded that artifacts. Is there any another benefit for that artifacts to download? We can use any another like way.
So the benefits of the artifacts is the following. Let's say if you have a log where all of the exceptions will go and all of the stack traces, you will need those to troubleshoot why something failed, why a test failed. If you have a log that shows all of the methods that the test executed, again, you can basically use that for troubleshooting because that will show you, exactly what happened until the error was generated. If you have screenshots that are taken on the page where a failure happened, again, that will show you the page before the error was generated, right? So the artifacts are basically just things that are very useful for troubleshooting why a test had a problem.
Yeah, okay.
But you can have other types of artifacts, like you can have HTML reports, right? So HTML reports could be, like an HTML report that shows you exactly what each test did. And that could be used as documentation, or that could be used for people that are curious what each test is doing, right?
We have another question from Abby. Abby's question is, hi, Alex. What are some common issues that we may be encountering?
With Azure DevOps?
I'm not sure. That's all the question. Abby,
Okay.
if you'd like, I can unmute you.
So one thing that I struggled for a while with is that if you use, so at work I'm not using Java, I'm using C#, right? And then I am running tests on cloud and on-premise virtual machines, and then all the time I'm using the Windows latest type of virtual machine, and from time to time Microsoft would basically upgrade the virtual machines. So the Chrome version changes, the Chrome driver version changes, and of course your test will not work anymore, right? And then I had to basically go back in the project and then update the dependencies, and then tested them locally, and then push the code one more time. So that type of situation where the Chrome changes on the virtual machine, Chrome driver changes on the virtual machine, that's like giving headaches sometimes. But there are solutions for it. Another problem is that I hope it's clear that in order to run your test in Azure DevOps, you have to be proficient. You don't have to be an expert, but you have to be proficient with a lot of things, right? You need to have a basic understanding of Maven. You need to have a basic understanding of Git. You need to have a basic understanding of Bash. You need to have a basic understanding of Docker later on, right? You need to understand YAML. So that could be a challenge sometimes, because if you don't have that basic understanding, again, you don't have to be an expert, then you may have a hard time figuring out, okay, how do I do this? How do I do that, right? How do I don't know. In my situation, I had a challenge with how to basically replace a keyword into a text for Ubuntu, right? I didn't know how to do it, so I had to just do some research, and then I figured it out eventually. So that could be like a problem, right? If you don't have like a good grasp of these technologies, then things will be slower. But we can learn, right?
Okay, does anyone else have any questions for Alex?
Oh yes, actually I do.
Yeah, go for it.
Hey Alex. So
John,
yeah.
How are you?
You know my voice.
Yes.
So is AWS pretty much similar to Azure pipeline? Have you ever used it?
I haven't, so I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I used Azure DevOps for the last few contracts. So I don't know AWS. Anything else?
Okay, anyone else any questions? Okay, so before we wrap it up,
one moment. I just need to mention one more thing. Can you still see my screen?
Hold on. Let me stop sharing. Yeah, you can go ahead and share your screen again. Sorry.
Sure can. Yeah, I just have one more thing to say. Okay, so basically what you saw today is just a summary of a new online course that I'm preparing for a website called educative.io. And the course is about, of course, running Selenium Java tests in Azure DevOps using pipelines. So this is basically the topic, right? What you saw is just a summary of that. Of course, the course will not be as brief as this presentation. You cannot do much in 1 hour and a half. The course will go into everything from the beginning until the end in high detail. So it will start with automation code, how it is written, why it is written that way, what it does, and then continue with the framework, automation framework, the Maven project, running tests in command prompt, running tests in Docker containers, setting up the project in Azure DevOps, moving the code to repository, and building pipelines on both virtual machines and Docker containers, right? Again, unfortunately, in 1.5 hours, I cannot cover all of that. But if you are interested in reviewing this course for free, I'm looking for reviewers, right? So I need some user feedback before I release this course, because that's what educative.io asks me to do. So if you are comfortable with Java, TestNG, and Maven, and you would like to help with reviewing that course for free, contact me, and then maybe you can help me with some feedback. And that's about it. Thank you. I hope you found this useful and interesting. And that's my email address. If you have any questions about it, feel free to message me.